And I'm back, and what I'm going to do here today is I'm going to change the P.C.V lines that go to the oil separator box on this 2001 Volvo V70. One of these is coolant from the engine that circulates through it. The other one's vapor from the crankcase, and they're run together here. The coolant warms up the vapor, so it allows it to precipitate down into the oil separator. There's another hose. Comes in the kit. This is all one kit. And we get a boot that goes on the separator. We get all the connections, all the hose clamps, and because we have to take off the intake manifold to get at all this, it comes with a new intake manifold gasket. Okay, so it's a bit of a process. It's not too bad if you can just realize up front that you got to take a bunch of stuff off to get to it. So, you know, it's not like it's not a 5-minute job. So basically, I'll just show you, you know, pretty much what's going to happen here. I'm going to drain the coolant down a little bit to get it below the thermostat housing. I'm going to take out this turbocharger pipe here. I'm going to take out the fuel rail, and I'm going to take off the power steering pump. And once we get down that far, we can start unbolting the intake manifold and just make some disconnections over here. And then we're going to try and lift that whole thing out with the throttle body that's mounted to the bottom of it. It's easier to take out the intake manifold with the throttle body attached to it. So I think I've got a way to do it here that's a little easier. Let's see. Oh, the other thing that's got to come off too is this engine support and that bracket right there to access where they're connected down in there. These the end of these hoses are connected down in here. It makes it a lot easier if this top engine mount comes off. Anyway, so I've already disconnected the battery and just about to get started in here. Okay, take that out of there. And there's another hose clamp down here that holds this pipe on. Okay, that out of there. I'm going to plug that hole on the turbocharger with a rag. So we're just going to push that little rail, that spring rail like that. Push it, pull those off of each injector. So that. Now we got these two bolts here. Just got one of these line disconnect tools. That one that just goes in like that, releases the line, simple as that, and then the rail comes right out of the way. Now I'm going to take off the tension on this serpentine belt that drives the alternator and the power steering pump. Okay, so the bolt on the tensioner down there is 15, and I've got a 15 box end on it, and I've got another wrench over the open end here. I'm just going to pull it clockwise, and that will loosen the belt. See, I can get the belt off the power steering pump here now, just like that. It'll drop out of the way. I'm not worried about where it goes for now. Okay, so there's a couple other things. I put a rag in this hose here, okay, that goes to the intercooler. All right, then that bolt has to come out of the dipstick tube, which is an O-ring on the bottom. It pulls out, and we've got the thermostat housing here, and this hose we can set aside in a minute once we drain some coolant down. And we're going to be very careful with that antifreeze because it's toxic to people and animals, so we don't want to leave that pan laying around for anyone to get into. And there's a hole right here underneath the driver's side of the bumper, and there's an internal Torx fitting on that drain plug. It's a T40, but there's also a hex on the outside, and it's a 13mm, so you can use a deep 13mm socket. And you just got to feel where it is. It's not quite centered in the hole. It seems to be more towards the driver's side on this car. So I can get on that there, and we'll just back it off like that. Well, there you go. There's the whole thing. You see it? There's a T40 on the inside there on the end. but it's 13 mil, got the hex on it. So anyway, it looks like I got to give that thing some air. There. Yeah, now it's flowing out of there. Just 2 T40 bolts to hold the thermostat housing down. And with this bolt out, I'm going to put this cover back on because I don't want to drop anything down in here. This is your timing belt. I don't want to drop anything down here, down there. It would just not be fun. And we'll have to take that out again later, but I feel much more comfortable with that cover sitting in place while we're working here than with it off. Okay. All right, that hose can come out of the way. There's 3 bolts that hold the power steering pump to the bracket, the 12mm bolts. And I haven't disconnected the fluid lines from it. I'm thinking that maybe I can just move it out of the way on the hoses. Right there, okay. Okay, so there's a couple of disconnections to make back there for this hose when we change it. But for right now, I'm just going to start loosening the bolts on the intake manifold. There's one more hose, a vacuum hose. I'm just going to take off the top there, stick it aside. And these are all 10mm bolts right here that hold the intake manifold to the head. Just like this. Okay. Clips on here. Clip here. Alright. Probably just set that up out of the way actually. Take our filter out. Push down like that. Look at that. That opens up a whole bunch more real estate in here. And what I'm trying to get to, I'm going to disconnect this line that comes out of the intercooler and goes to the intake manifold, to the throttle body. And that'll come out with the intake manifold. That's something I discovered before. If you try and take it out, put it in separately, like once the intake manifold's in, you'll never get to it. It's a nightmare. I did it the first time. It was just absolute foolishness. But not that this isn't. There's a bit of foolishness too, isn't it? But this is better foolishness than that. Now, where did my screwdriver go? I have some connections here. Got one here. There's a sensor there. Gotta gently pull that off of there. Okay, that's off. And then I got that other line disconnected from the manifold. That's off of there. Okay, and there is another one. Oh, the whole sensor came out. Let's see it. Sometimes they're squeeze and pull, sometimes they're push and pull. That looks every bit like something you would squeeze to separate it. But let's see. Yeah, that is it. Squeeze to separate it. Squeeze to separate it. And I'm going to put that back in the hole. Put that down in there. Put that back down there. All right. See, that's going to come out with it. This pipe is coming out with the intake manifold. That's the whole idea. Okay. Okay, so this was the last thing I had to disconnect. Is this bolt. Bolts onto the bottom of the intake manifold right there. And you got to get in there with a 17mm wrench. And with that done, I can stand this up now. And you pretty much got to have this completely vertical to get it out. And you see I'm watching how I got quite a bit of slack in this line here. I'm just working this out around the fuel line. Right back here. And you see right there, I just walked it out around that line. That line stays stationary. You just have to bring the manifold up, stand it up straight like this, and then walk it around like that to get it off of there. And there it is. That's your intake manifold, your throttle body, and the line coming from your intercooler. Now, I think what I can do because I'm just about ready to wrap this up for the night, I'm going to disconnect this plug and sit the whole thing aside. Don't try and disconnect this wire up here. Disconnect it at the plug. All right. And right here, see right there? That's that bolt I talked about. Okay. That's the one that held it. That was the last thing I had to disconnect. Okay, now, so there's the whole intake manifold. Comes out in one piece. And that is the way to do it. Don't try and take the throttle body off with it in the car, with the manifold in the car. It's just impossible. Take it out in one piece, put it in one piece. Okay, I'll set this aside and we'll take a look at that, changing that hose. All right, so here it is. And it's just got, there's a hose clamp here on top of the separator. I'm just going to pop that up. Okay, looking at the new hose, you can see where there's this hose that comes back. It doubles back on itself here, like that. And there's another one of those Banjo bolts that goes into the water jacket of the head. And this one here goes down to the line on the turbo, okay? All right, so we're gonna pop that off. There's a clip down there. We're gonna take that off, and we're gonna take out this, the Banjo bolt on the side of the head. There's a 17mm head on it, and we can pull this out. Okay. Okay. There's that clip fell down. Okay. That's the clip that came off that hose. And all right, so here's the culprit right here, is the whole thing. Okay. Okay, here's your oil separator box. Okay. And there's a couple of hose clamps. There's one here. Okay, and there's another one down there. And there's two bolts, one here and one on the other side, that hold it to the block, and we'll just pull that whole thing right out of there. Okay, and that just pulls off the block like that. Okay. And out it comes. Okay, here it comes. All right. All right, gotta bring that out. Yeah. I'm just gonna probe that hole a bit and see how much deposits are in there. This was cleaned out about a year ago, and I changed the box at the time, but I didn't have that pipe. So now I figure it's worthwhile changing the pipe, because if I do a glove test on the crankcase, I get a bit of, the glove doesn't just suck down into the hole on the filler cap. It expands a little bit, so I figure maybe change the hose and see if we can improve that. But no, that passage, while it's got a bit of residue in there, it's not plug solid, I can see. And what I'll do tomorrow is I'll blow some compressed air down in here and make sure I can hear it running into the pan, make sure that that's a free connection. And then we'll get that put back on there. Okay, so while I'm down in here, I'm going to change these knock sensors that go on the block here, because they're almost impossible to reach. And so I've got new knock sensors here. So I'm just going to unbolt them here and here, change that, plug it in down there, and then that's out of the way, because that's something that's been on my mind. I've had these for a while, and I'd like to get those changed. Now's the time to do it. Like I say, similarly, you know, if you had an old starter that had been acting up in any way at all, now's the time to change it when you got that intake manifold off, because you'd have to take it off to get to it. Okay, so new hose, old hose. You can see here that where that Banjo bolt goes up through, and what that does, that connects the vapor canister. That connects the canister, the top of the canister, through. You can see it. There's a very small line right there. Okay, to the intake manifold. That was the bolt. That was the last one that was on the bottom of the manifold that I had trouble lifting it. I had to take that out. And I didn't show that on camera, but I will show you putting it in. This one here comes from the thermostat housing. This is cooling water, so it comes through this outside one here, goes along there, passes heat to that other one, and then back in here into the side of the head. And this one here picks up vapor off the intake hose. Okay, so that produces an exchange here, so it warms up that vapor. And what happens is the any of the condensate of that oil drips down into this box, separates into the bottom, drains into the block. This takes any combustible crankcase gases off the top of the head right here. Okay, similarly bringing it into here. And this connection to the intake manifold creates a bit of vacuum in that system. It pulls, so it'll pull vacuum into this, and it'll draw that vapor out of those components and into here so that the oil can separate down. I've got that little adapter onto the block, okay, and that's the oil out of the separator into the sump. Okay, and like I say, we're going to reuse this hose, top one, so I'll sit this down here, put that in, and we need a hose clamp here. Let's get a hose clamp, put that on there, and that squeezed in at the bottom. Okay, that's good. Okay, it's going to go in there like that, and it's got to come. We'll get to that in a second. We got to come over here, and you can see where that part of it's going to go down on top of the separator. I need a clamp there. Okay, you can see right here is the end of this new hose. It's got to go down onto here. See it right there? Okay. And I just got to get a stubby and tighten that hose clamp. Okay, got that nice and tight. All right, now move back to the banjo bolt. All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm using a torch to heat up these copper washers. And we'll expand them and soften them so we can reuse them. Just get them orange. About like that's good. And let it cool. Get the other one the same. Okay, so I've got one of these banjo bolts here. Okay, and it's going to be one of these copper washers on either side of the fitting into the side of the head. The light on the phone, there it is there. Okay, now I don't know how I can get, oh yeah, here we go. Now if we can get that on the end of it. Okay, it's on the end of it, I think. Yeah, now near the hole, like that. Okay, now get a wrench on it. See if I can get a turn on there. Not much room for a turn. All we gotta do is get that started. All we gotta do is get that in there a little bit. Let's get it started. Come on. Yeah. Okay. Sometimes you get lucky. Yeah, that's the light coming off of that. Okay, I'm pulling that old intake manifold gasket off. I have a new one. Okay. Get that out of there. So I got the intake manifold here. complete with the throttle body and the pipe. Now, I see right down here, that's where this has to go. So I'm going to leave that and try and, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk that intake manifold in place partially, and then hook, and then hook. So it's in like that, see that? And then turn it this way. Sort of a dance to get that in there. Okay. Now, turn it one at a time. Here, that plugged in. Okay. Let's get that down. All right. Now, let's see. Out of the way. Let's see. Oh, I see where that hose has to come. This hose has to come up through. Ah, yes. Of course, up through here. There. Now, that is almost that. Let's get my camera out of the way here. Hard on equipment is what I am. All right, get that hose up out of the way. Leave the rag in it. Okay, so I'll just pull that power steering line up over the manifold, and I set the manifold, that little fork on the manifold, I set it down on that stud, the first one. Okay, now there's some stuff in the way, but I think I can get it. There it is. Okay, it's on there for now, but the clamp's not tight. That's okay. And that's almost there. You see, this is that end of that hose with the Banjo fitting. I got to pull that up and screw it to the bottom of the intake manifold. Now I can move this out of the way, see, because that's all loose. So I get that up out of the way. Well, not that you can see it, but that hose, it's right here. All right, you see where my finger is here? That goes to the thermostat housing. Okay, so I'm going to get a hose clamp on there. And then that Banjo bolt must be, yeah, it's pretty close. So I can lift this a bit, see? I can manipulate that to get at that bolt before I hook that one to the water pump. So I think I can do that. Okay, that Banjo bolt's just under in front of where my finger is, and it comes in on just a slight angle into the bottom of the intake manifold. And a little bit of wrestling, I got it. So it's in there, it's snug. And here's this line that comes out and goes to the thermostat housing right there. Just gotta hook that up. But it's a pretty tight squeeze, and I'm wondering if, you know, there's a couple things in hindsight. You know, it would be a lot easier to get at that with the alternator out, and that would have been just a couple of bolts. I didn't do that. But with the alternator out, you'd have got it quite easily. And then the other thing I thought about is maybe that connection should be made while the intake manifold's still out of the car. I'd probably make it easier again, because I mean, all you'd have to do is find where it pushes down onto the top of the separator. You know, that little piece there, push it down, you can get at it with a long screwdriver to tighten the clamp from the other side. So yeah, that would have been the way to do it. But yeah, I wanted to fight with it a bit, I guess. Anyway, now it's time to put the bolts in the manifold. Okay, so I got the intake manifold bolted in, and I'm just starting to put the components back around it and on it. And so this is going to be the last thing I do this evening, because I'm losing daylight again. And I put the fuel rail in. I just put some oil on the O-rings. Those are new O-rings just a few months ago. So and you just set it in place, and then just give it a gentle push down, and the O-ring takes care of the rest of it. That's it. Got two little bolts to put here. Okay, so I skipped ahead, put it all back together, and so I'm just about to start it here. Started right up. Yeah, we got bombed with some rain here, so I just had to get it done. So I wasn't going to film every little thing. It's just the reverse of the disassembly. One of the hardest things was putting this belt back on, this serpentine belt. That's really tough to do. You got to figure out the routing, know that, and then put on the bottom one, the crank one, and the one on the AC, and then pull it up. And then the last one is power steering pump. You just leave it kind of partially onto there, and then get a wrench, a 15mm on the tensioner, and pull it this way. And the last bit of the belt that goes on is on top of the power steering pump. Once you figure that out, it's not too bad. Sounds good. So we're going to do a glove test on here. Let's try the glove test on there now. See, sucks it down. Which it should. See that? See how it's taking it down? And before this, before I changed those hoses, it was inflating the glove slowly. So that's the right result right there. See, it's pulling the glove down. It's deflating the glove. See that? That means it's working right. That's what it's supposed to do. But look at that. Don't even have to tie it down with an elastic band. See? It's pulling it down. That's telling you it's working right. So that's a success. That's how that's done. Thanks for watching. Comment, like, and subscribe. And we'll see you again here very soon on Everyday Projects. Bye for now.